relatively familiar with it. Thinking about like the quantum realm and quantum physics, about matter. My knowledge of it is about like matter and like transmutation and like transportation through different dynamics and elements.
Right.
But that's about it.
And I think the clinical definition of it is when you have a certain particle of matter that can jump, that can, it can make a quantum leap from one thing to another,
Gotcha.
where it doesn't go through the normal path of growth.
Okay.
It makes a quantum leap. And so there's a coach that I know, and this guy's name is Price Pritchett, and he does a lot of investment banking and business consulting. So the idea is where can we apply that in our lives instead of just going in a linear path?
Right.
But if we can identify where we can take advantage of a quantum leap, and where do we set ourselves up for a quantum leap, and what do we need to be ready for a quantum leap? Right. Like even when we do a lot of this, we're practicing. And if the idea is that if we prepare ourselves for a quantum leap, if we position ourselves for a quantum leap, when it happens, we'll have the skill set that we need for that jump that already happened. Right? Like how many players went straight to the league from high school?
Right.
Not that many.
That
would be a quantum leap. So he argues that there's no reason that we can't make quantum leaps in our own lives if we're identifying where it is exactly that we want to go. So if we identify exactly where we want to go, then position ourselves with what we need once we're there, and prepare now, and to prepare yourself for that quantum leap. So it's a fascinating theory of, preparing for the quantum leap, so that way when you do make the jump, you're already prepared with the tools you need in that, to perform at that level. So that's the basics around it.
No, that's big. And the first thing that comes to my mind hearing that is vision. Like setting the appropriate scope of the vision, because I think that we're going to align our behaviors and our decisions that we make based on whatever the vision is. And so to my mind, I'm thinking of someone, to your point, who goes from high school straight to the NBA and doesn't have to go play on the collegiate level or overseas.
Yeah.
I'm thinking like, okay, so you must have had a belief that was possible for you. Because if your only belief was that you're going to go to college, you would have aligned yourself and governed yourself, and you would have taken made the decisions to get to college.
Yep.
So instead of trying to see if you're qualified or what numbers you have to do or what your averages need to be or what your points and your stats have to be in order to get ranked, in order to be able to go straight to the league. Right. Instead of doing that, you don't have that vision. You think about going to college, and you're going to govern yourself about going to play on the collegiate level. And that reminds me of, and inversely, because they wanted to go to the league, they might have trained differently. They may not have taken a certain amount of days off. Maybe they can't take a summer off in between school years. Maybe they can't, take weekends off because they're saying, hey, I need to jump 5 years. I don't want to go to college and take another 2-3 years to develop. So now I have to work twice as hard, 3 times as hard as those of my peers because I'm trying to do something different. I got it's a young athlete of mine, and they had a goal. They were inspired with a vision of getting a full ride scholarship to a D1 program by junior year of high school. Now, everybody has that desire, right? Maybe, you know what I mean, if they want to go play at a high level.
Right.
However, as soon as I hear that, I'm like, okay, great. That's possible. Now, are you willing to do what it takes to make that type of a jump? Because everybody else is just going to kind of wait and get to their senior year and then see where the chips fall and see what options are available. But you're trying to grab hold of your destiny and like make something happen. And so you're casting that vision, but that vision comes with quantum leap above and beyond the average. And so now I'm looking at the behaviors and the decisions that they're making. And now in the 8th grade, they're doing things that seniors in high school are doing. right? Versus if you look at all of your peers on that level, they may go to practice, come home.
Yep.
They may do a little bit of extra training, come home.
Yep.
But now because their goal is by junior year of high school, I want a full ride scholarship to a D1 program. Now, instead of going to practice and come home, they're going to camps, they're traveling, they're going to these, they're with different trainers.
Yep.
Parents are investing in me to get the child right. They're doing things that players do on a collegiate level. But there's going to be no surprise when come junior year, now you get a full ride scholarship as a junior versus everybody else because you casted that vision. Even though it might be grand compared to others, you then came back and now you're willing to make the decisions and take the actions to getting there. So I think, belief goes a long way for that for me.
Yeah, and you use the word jump, and that's the whole word leap, right? I mean, that's the whole idea behind it is that, what preparation are you doing to prepare yourself for a quantum leap?
Yeah.
And number one has to be the belief that you're capable of doing it. Number one, right? That has to be number one.
Big time.
Because if you don't have the belief that you have the capability to get it done, it doesn't matter whether you do all the prep work or and if you don't see yourself there, right? And I think that's oversimplifying the word vision, right? Because the word vision, it's like gotta have the vision, and I think that can be very daunting for someone, especially if they're younger. Right, like vision, it's this big word, right? It's like, well, you got to have a vision. What's the vision?
Right.
It's a very grand word, right? But I think the way to simplify it is that seeing yourself there.
Big time.
Right? Like, do you see yourself there? And I think that's the easy step of like, okay, do you see yourself there? And there can be a linear path to get there. At the same time, if you do a certain amount of work and you possess a certain amount of skill, and you have a certain amount of talent, a quantum leap towards that goal is possible if you prepare for it and you have the belief that it's possible and you see yourself there, right? I think all of that kind of lines up together of what we both just said.
Big time.
Right? So this idea behind preparing yourself for a quantum leap, and I'll send you the book. It's called The Quantum Leap Theory.
Okay.
And the whole idea is he's looking at it from through the business lens, but the exact same thing could be in family, could be in, it's probably a lot harder with our bodies because that has to be a lot more linear, right? You can't just jump to 10 pounds of muscle, right?
True.
That's not something you can just make that leap on.
Right.
At the same time, it's if you can make a quantum leap in how you perceive yourself. I think that's also the metaphor behind it too. So there's a lot of tools there that we can all learn from to say, what can I take away from this? One, can I see myself there? Right. I think sometimes we use the word vision. I'm probably guilty of this also. That the word vision is a very grand word.
It is.
It's like, what's the vision, right? What's the vision? It feels big saying it, but just to oversimplify it is sort of, can you see yourself there? Right. And the first thing to do is to see yourself there, right? If it's a person wants to be an actor, actress, and wants to be on Broadway, wants to win an Oscar, wants to, have a big movie premiere. I think the first step is saying, can you see yourself there?
Yeah.
Right? And I think it can be a little daunting to people, probably included, is that, well, what's the vision? Cast the vision, write the vision. What's the vision? It's like, that could be a little heavy. Versus, where is it? What does it look like? What does it feel like to be there? Can you picture yourself there?
Yeah.
If you can picture yourself there, what does it feel like to be there? What's it going to feel like to stand at the Oscars and give a speech?
What's it going to feel like? I think that's a big one.
Right. What's it going to feel like to lift that trophy up? What's it going to feel like to have the confetti flowing down on the 50-yard line after you won the Super Bowl? Right? What's that going to feel like? And that can be a powerful tool to activate our inner fire.
100%.
Right? And I think that if we can activate our inner fire, we can throw a little lighter fluid on it from time to time. It starts with being able to see yourself there, which in and of itself is just saying, what's the vision? Now, casting the vision is then when you're taking that and you're promoting it to others, with the thought of inspiring them to be a part of building the vision.
Right.
So I think vision is a bigger word. If you're trying to build something and you want others to be a part of building that vision.
Mm-hmm.
So here's what I envision, right?
Yeah.
And I think if we take it, down to the personal side, I think seeing yourself in that place and then attaching those emotions and attaching those feelings with what it would be like to be in that place can be an immense motivator, right? To getting you there.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I think what you said was very powerful. And in the realm of energy, when you say attach the emotion, I remember hearing some information talking about like how to manifest. We all kind of have a decent understanding on what manifesting is and goal setting and visualization. But they said it's only effective. It's like watering the plant. You can put the seed in the ground, but now you got to water it, right? You got to give it sunlight. And they're saying that the watering and the sunlight to help that vision or whatever you're trying to manifest grow is by sending energy towards it. Writing it down as energy, right? But then also connecting an emotion, a feeling to it is the energy that's required to actually now start to get it moving towards you or to start to change your behaviors and actions subconsciously in order to start becoming that person and creating that environment that's going to yield the results of you getting to the goal. Yeah. They're saying visualize what you want. Like if you say, hey, I want to be a pilot one day. They're saying, well, imagine yourself in the cockpit, in the plane, flying the plane. And then they said, imagine the feeling. How will you feel? How will you be thinking as a pilot? You know what I mean? Even like almost like put yourself in a dream state in an imaginatory position to where now you're assuming the position of a pilot. And they say stay in that position often. So not only just desire to be a pilot, they said now visualize yourself being in that position, how it would feel, conducting yourself, the mannerisms, the behaviors, the situations. Put yourself in a situation as a pilot to evoke that feeling, that emotion. And they said that's what makes it stick. And that's what actually generates that universal kind of dynamic to where you're magnetic and you're kind of slowly but surely moving and evolving towards what you desire.
It makes sense. It makes a lot of sense. And being able to identify what skill sets that person needs to be at that level, right? So part of it is feeling what it feels like and then getting to work, right? And saying, okay, what are the skill sets that I need so that way I can make that quantum leap. So that way I can handle being in the cockpit. And I think there are some people, and I was probably guilty of this when I was younger, and being able to envision, but then not putting in the workload behind it, right? So, there's people that can envision what it's like to win the Super Bowl or envision what it's like when Kobe put up 5 rings, but the question is did they do the work to be able to get to that point?
Big time.
And that's a huge, it's a big mirror moment, as I say, right? And I think it's looking in the mirror and saying, did I put in the work? And I know that I've been challenged with that sometimes too, in that, I'll be in certain environments and, or certain places, and the way, I've had a couple of situations and I'm like, look at the way these people, this person is interacting with me.
Correct.
And I have to, go back into, where I was in my life at that time when that interaction happened. And I have to look at them and like, hey, I can't really blame them. I was almost expecting respect rather than earning it. I think that was a huge mistake I made when I was younger, was just expecting respect rather than earning it. And I think there's a big difference, and I think it's a lot easier to also then get lost in a fantasy world, which of the envisioning part, but then not putting in the work behind it. Faith without works is dead.
100%.
Right. So it's a little bit of both, and it's understanding that the Bible has a lot of these great life philosophies that can also be translated to business, that can be translated to sports, that can be translated to your personal relationships, and that's one of them. And that's the other one that I shared a couple, maybe last week or the week before, which is, God steers but you row.
Yeah.
Right. And it's along those same lines. And the question is that are you where you want to be? Yes or no? And have you been rowing? and then now this new concept of being capable of handling a quantum leap. And I think that's a big thing also, because in that young man being able to get that D1 offer in junior year of high school, can he handle the conversations that are necessary to have with the head coaches? Can he handle the level of freedom that's going to come with going to a D1 school and being given all of these freedoms?
Right.
And is he going to be able to handle the NIL? Is it NIL?
NIL.
NIL deals. Is he going to be able to handle the type of attention that's going to come along with that? And now, just based on media in general, there's a lot more for a young person to have to be capable of handling. It's just real talk. You know, to be able to handle what that's like. I mean, I could imagine what it would be like for when we were in college to have social media to the extent that it is today. Right? I mean, we could actually go out and go to a party and enjoy ourselves and just be with our friends. And it wasn't about checking in somewhere and tagging things and putting up stories. And it's a different landscape. We could just go out and have a good time. And at the same time, you could just enjoy yourselves with your friends, and you weren't worried about this person putting this story up and this doing that, and it's a different era.
Right.
So then the question is whether or not that young man is also capable of handling what could possibly come with that responsibility. So are we preparing ourselves for the responsibility that's going to come with where we see ourselves down the road? Same thing with the pilot metaphor. Yeah, you could, a person can envision themselves in the cockpit, but the amount of, can they handle that responsibility, right? I mean, when you hear air traffic controllers and pilots talk through, they'll say, 198 souls on board, right? You ever heard them say that? Right? Like, that's some heavy shit, and like, that's heavy to think that you quite literally have 198 souls based on your skill set. That's wild. That's wild. That is a wild thought, and it is a heavy responsibility, right? So, as we take the time to envision where we want to be, feel what it would feel like to be there, and then determine what skills we would need to be able to handle it. A lot of times we got to get that from people that are already there, right? You ever see Kobe when he started playing on the court? The whole time Kobe was tugging on MJ's shorts, like, hey, when you did this, like, what were you thinking here? Hey, and everyone was like, looking at him like, man, why do you ask, why you keep asking questions? You've already succeeded. You made it to the league. He's like, this is just like, was this your goal?
Right.
This isn't my goal.
Right.
And he was always trying to figure out what skills he would need to take it to the next level. And I think that's a great metaphor of how we should live our lives. Yeah. And if we go back to this idea of making a quantum leap and saying, okay, well, I can go from this position to that position. I can go from here to there. I mean, I think we've over glamorized the idea of becoming an entrepreneur, and the bar has definitely been lowered with accessibility.
Yeah.
But the question is, does someone really have the skill set and capability they need to be able to handle what it takes to have employees, let's just say? Right? I mean, that's a whole skill set in and of itself for someone to have 20 employees. When you start talking about taxes and personalities and lawsuits and, losing your best person to this, I mean, it's a lot of responsibility. And I'm not saying it that I've had that responsibility. I haven't.
Right.
To run a company of 20 people, only 20 people. That's still a wild responsibility. So, the question is that are we picking up the skill sets along the way, and are we constantly preparing ourselves for that quantum leap, or are we dreaming?
Yeah, that's big time. That's a good word.
I think dreaming is then the side of it where you're not. You may even be attaching the feeling behind it, but you're not putting in the work behind it. Then you're just dreaming. At that point, you're just dreaming. You're not really. If you're not putting the work behind what you envision, it's just a dream.
It's very true, and the thing about it, is it sparked so many different points. So we talked about like standards, we talked about environment, dream state, right? You roll, but God steers, just having the faith to take the action. And it really makes me intrigued on the word environment. And I think about like a plant that's growing. I'll go back to that plant metaphor. You can put a plant in the ground, but you can't just walk away and expect that it's just going to do what it does. It needs a certain type of environment and certain things to happen in order to progress and actually sprout and to grow. You got to water that sunlight, it has oxygen, and not too much of it, a right amount. And for any plant owners, if you have a plant in your home that requires a certain type of environment, you can buy it with the intention of creating that environment consistently enough to keep the plant alive. Now, say you go on vacation for 2 weeks and you come back, and unfortunately, some of your plants didn't make it through that 2 weeks.
Yep.
Why? Because the environment changed. They weren't receiving the appropriate amount of oxygen.
Sure.
They weren't shifted as the sun went up and down to make sure they were getting the right amount of sunlight. Right. The environment was not such that it cultivated more growth. And so when I think about another way, an easier way to understand what we're saying about visualization and actually getting to that goal is, are we creating the environment for that? Are you putting yourself, are you conducting yourself, are you operating as someone who is worthy of what you're asking for? Because if you have aspirations to be a lion and you're acting like a bear, that's kind of going to be the result of it. It's just you can't really be disconnected from the goal and your daily behaviors and your daily processes and procedures. And that leads me back to the word that you started off with, was standards. I think environment is directly connected to standards, because standards leads me to viewing them as almost boundaries, right? And then if you have boundaries and you have different environments, right? Environments generally have a certain amount of boundaries that maintain the dynamic of that environment. And if those boundaries are breached, if things are changed, then the environment shifts. And so we kind of gauge different environments based on their structure, based on what they allow versus what they don't allow. And if another one allows something that this one doesn't allow, it's a completely different environment. And so I think that it's good to just viewpoint. I know I tell myself this often. I have to maintain the environment of someone who is where I'm trying to go. And if I'm continuing to act like where I'm at and I'm unwilling to make those changes and those sacrifices to behave and to operate like someone who is in that realm, then I can't be qualified to get into that realm. I'm going to always stay in my current environment if I'm not willing to adjust my standards and boundaries of what I will allow, what I won't allow for myself to match the environment of the people who are over there, because I want to be like one of them. And so I think it's important to understand the standards and boundaries and create the appropriate environment for what you're going for. Like for me, if I want to be focused week over week over week over week over week, I might not be able to stay up late and have inconsistent sleep patterns because now I'm not going to be able to be focused. And so if I have a goal of getting to a certain level in my life by a certain time, right? It's a certain pace I have to maintain. And that pace is directly impacted by my decisions and my choices on what I choose to do on a daily basis, my own personal standards of how I govern myself. And so that was a big key. And then when you said something, but it made me think about a statement that I heard, and it was like, are you willing to fail at it? It's like whatever you want, like entrepreneurship. You said it's almost a lust for entrepreneurship, for that freedom, right? But they think that the strength of the desire is from a place of the outcome of success. An entrepreneur who is very successful and everything that goes with that, then they receive the freedom. Then they receive financial abundance. Then they receive a certain lifestyle and dynamic. But that's on the successful side of things, after they probably have grown and failed and learned and applied and implemented over time. So we see the results and the outcome, and we're like, I want that. That's better than this, sitting at this desk all day long, being bossed around. I'd rather go start my own thing, govern myself, and do what I would like to do and bring my own value to the marketplace. However, are you willing to fail at it first? And I think if you present people with that question about whatever it is that they want, if I say, who you want to be in 10 years? I want to be this, I want to do this, I want to create this. Okay, Are you willing to fail at that first? Because before you can say, I desire to receive the outcomes of being in that position, you have to be willing to go through the growth stages to take you from here to there in order to receive those outcomes.
Sure.
That's going to require you failing at it first. That's the only way we grow. You want to learn martial arts, you're going to have to suck first before you can become an expert. You got to start as a beginner. If you want to learn how to shoot a basketball, you're going to have to brick a lot to increase your percentage to start making it.
Yep.
Anything you want to learn how to do, you want to ride a bike, you're going to have to be willing to fall off, scrape your knee, and get back up in order before you can take off the trainer wheels. Anything you do, you have to be willing to fail first before you get there. And I think if we prompt ourselves with that question immediately after we goal set, so that we're not in that dream state of just fantasizing and lusting over the outcome, if we come and ask, am I willing to fail at this first? Am I willing to be bad at this? Am I willing to be a terrible entrepreneur first before I can become great? Now, if we ask ourselves that, now we're going to think about how it feels to fail at something. Am I willing to deal with the internal feelings of potentially being embarrassed, potentially feeling like I don't know what I'm doing? Are you willing to handle that? I think that might get in the way of most of us. I know I can relate, right? We're going to embark on a path. I train people every day outside of their comfort zone, and I have to help them overcome the mental hurdle of not being good at something. And as an adult, it's hard to grapple with that feeling of not being good, right? Not knowing how to bench press, not really knowing how to move your limbs in order to bring the weight up appropriately.
True.
And then it's a frustration that makes you want to stop. And I tell them, I say, we can't get to 10 before we go through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
Yep.
You're at 1 right now.
Yep.
This is what 1 feels like. You want to get to 10. You got to keep pumping.
Yeah.
We got to keep going.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Completely. I mean, there's 3 things that came up when you were saying that. And this goes back to where you started about talking about environment and, sort of what that means. But, to add to what you're saying, first of all, I agree with you completely about being able to fail at it first.
Mm-hmm.
And to add another layer to that is to really look at someone and say, are you willing to pay the price? That's the price.
Big time.
Right? I mean, if a person sees a Ferrari and they say, that's too expensive, no problem. It's not that it's too expensive. It's just you're not willing to pay the price.
Right.
No problem.
Right.
Right? Don't call something too expensive if you just can't afford it. Right? So there's 2 ways to look at things. And you can find out a lot about a person when you hear them talk through some of these small cues, right? Like if you're talking to a friend, they goes, oh, well, when you go that places, they're real expensive, or they're this, they're that. Okay, no problem, right? You start to see how they frame the cost behind things, right? When you say to someone, you got to get to 10 reps. Oh, by the way, you want to get to this level of physicality, right? You want to get your body fat percentage to here. You want to get your muscle mass to here. You want to get your agility to here, ... Are you willing to pay the price? There's a price. The question is, are you willing to pay it?
100.
And the reason that's a good way to think about it is that you only have a certain amount of money on you at all times, which is the time that we have.
Yeah.
Right. I had a situation last night where I was meeting up with a friend, and they really dropped the ball on timing.
Yeah.
And didn't let me know. And we're talking about an hour and a half.
Yeah. And
you know me. You know me.
You might be at the house by the time they pull up.
So, that's something that I took. And again, something that I need to work on a little more is taking things personal. I understand. I also believe that if you maintain standards and if you communicate those standards, I think it's okay to realize that if a person knows your standards and acts a certain way in direct response to those standards, I'm going to take it personal.
Yeah.
I'm going to take it personal.
Yeah.
Right? And I think that's okay, because then you got to get MJ on it and take it personal and let that, you know what I'm talking about. You're like, Last Dance. You know exactly what I'm talking about, right?
Chair. I took that personal.
I took it personal because if he gets to the point of feeling that he's paid the price to be who he is. He's paid the price to get to where he's been. And in his perspective, there's a certain level of treatment that should come from people. Now, if there's an expectation into how people should treat him, and if there's a disconnect, I don't know. I'm not here to play the moral police about Michael Jordan. I don't know. Is his disconnect on how he feels he should be treated versus reality? I don't know. There's a lot that goes into it. Also, in the game of human nature, they could have been projecting envy and jealousy and all these crazy things. So that could be something, right? Because we've all experienced that. And the more we de-earmuff ourselves to human nature, the louder it gets, right? Because there's people that ignorance is bliss, right? There are people that have they have noise canceling Bose headphones, and then they got the Apple joints on top.
Yeah.
And they're walking through life oblivious to human nature. Oblivious to human nature. But again, I think in that context, he found out what worked for him. What worked for him was to say, oh, you're going to give me fuel? Great. I'm always looking for fuel. And he was able to create his own fuel, right? So let's take a couple steps back. The frame of failing, are you willing to fail at it first? Are you willing to fail forward?
Right.
There's a great Denzel interview that he talks about that. Fail forward.
Oh, yeah.
Right? There's like a audio clip of it.
Yeah.
And yes. And then to add to that is, okay, are you willing to pay the price? And there are people out there that want to have a Ferrari body.
Big time.
They want to have a Ferrari house.
Big time.
They want to have a Ferrari car, literally, but they're not willing to pay the price, right? And I think that's a huge. I think that's a very good way to look at it, right? So that's number one. Number two goes even further back when we were talking, which was the idea of be, do, have. Right. Simplifying it, right? Where who do I want to be? What do I need to do? What would that person do? Then I will have what that person has.
Be, do, have. I like that.
Be, do, have. So it goes, it's oversimplified in saying a couple of different ways. Act as if, right? Or just carry yourself like you have it already, right? And there's different ways to do it, right? If I were to say to you, and here's one that I've even used myself, and if you get up in the morning, and if I were to tell you that, hey, by the way, you just won $10 million, right? You just won $10 million. You're like, oh, wow, that's incredible. But it's going to hit the bank tomorrow. But it's okay. Like, you have it.
Yeah.
The energy that you're going to go through that day is crazy, right? Think about that.
Yeah.
And how do we do that to ourselves, right? Where it's like, if a person walks around like, hey, you know what? I have the monetary success I want. That energy that you're projecting into the world is wild. So how do you connect into that, right? So this template of be, do, have, it's saying, be that person that you see down the road.
Oh, yeah.
Do what they do, right? So for example,
do what they do.
If a person's in the corporate environment, if their goal is to be a CEO of a company in the corporate world, again, I think we've wrongfully attacked the corporate world because we've just glorified the entrepreneurship world. While it's completely noble and necessary for us to have extreme high-level corporate executives that are running massive organizations 100%. That are also creating thousands upon hundreds of thousands of jobs.
100%.
So we have this illusion and this glorification of entrepreneurship without also understanding that what it takes to be a number 4 in the organization, what it takes to be the number 12 in an organization.
Oh yeah.
What it takes to be there can be successful in building, maybe not a business, but building a very successful career. And I think that's something that needs to be thought about. So
big time.
If a person sees themselves and wants to be a corporate executive, which is a very noble path to go, right? Then what would that corporate executive do? Right? And then if you do that, then you will have what that corporate executive, so be, do, have.
Right.
So that's the second point. And then the third point then goes into environment, where you mentioned before. We had spoken about it a long time ago of identifying what kind of plant you are, and if at all necessary, figuring out what environment you thrive in best. And that's on the macro.
A good word.
That's the macro.
Right.
It's the macro. If it turns out that you're a palm tree, Identify that.
Right.
Self-awareness. Know thyself. Every religion across the board has had some kind of variation on that.
Mm-hmm.
You're a palm tree. You're a Douglas fir. You're a Christmas tree, Douglas fir, pine,
Mm-hmm.
right? You're a rose bush, whatever. But how do you identify what type of tree you are and what environment you will thrive most in? That's number one. Right? If you're a person that is eager to dive into the entrepreneurship world, I'm not sure moving to Idaho is going to be the best environment.
True.
Right? Even though if a person were to look at it dollar for dollar and say, but wait a second, if I move to Idaho, I can have a 5-acre house with 4,000 square feet at $250,000. No problem. I agree with you. That same house in Silicon Valley would cost you $20 million, right? Because of the environment. So in agreement with what you said before is how important the environment is for the environments that we don't have any control over.
Right.
So I'm gonna unpack it even more. 2 types of environments.
Right.
Environments we have no control over, and environments we have control over.
Yeah.
So if we look at it from the environments we don't have control over, and then putting ourselves there intentionally, or removing ourselves from there, or putting ourselves in those environments strategically,
Mm-hmm.
and removing ourselves from those environments strategically, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's the same amount of gym equipment in Planet
Mm-hmm.
Fitness as there is in Equinox, right? So it's the same metal equipment that's there, much different environment.
Yep.
Right? So if we say to ourselves, okay, what environments do I have limited control over or no control over? You can't control the weather. And I'm going to identify when I'm going to put myself in that environment because it's a benefit to me, right? Where a person, they need to use the hotel gym, right? Is it an ideal environment? No. But at the same time, if you're going to pay a gym membership and realize that a gym membership to Planet Fitness versus a gym membership to Equinox is much different.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, if you looked on paper and we say this is a 12,000 square foot facility and they have bench press and this and hammer strength and treadmills, they have the boxes checked.
Yeah.
Much different environment.
Big time.
And that's an easy one for a lot of people to understand, right? So that's number one. Environments, those we have no control over. And then the second one is environments that we curate,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then how do we identify curating the right environments for what we want and what we need? So what I think about
Good
that
point.
is that you can have a house. And within your house, how strategic are you in curating different environments and different rooms, right? Based on
Mm-hmm.
the utility of that environment. So if there's a certain utility of an environment that you want to get out of it, right? Which you have control over. Remember, the other side of the uncontrollable side of things, I can't control what music they play at the gym.
Right.
I can put headphones on,
Mm-hmm.
but I can't control the music.
Right.
So I don't have control of that environment. I don't have control of the temperature that they set in the gym.
Right.
Right. I don't have control of that. At the same time, if we do have control of environments within our bigger dwelling, are we leveraging that and utilizing that to the best of our ability? As an
Mhm.
example, a bedroom environment, right? Are we curating that environment
Mm-hmm.
for what it is that we want to utilize in that environment,
Mm-hmm.
right? In our kitchen,
Big word.
right? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
In our kitchen, are we curating that environment for what it is we want to use that
Mhm.
environment for? I don't think I've ever seen, and correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think I've ever seen a kitchen with carpeting. In theory, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it might sound laughable to somebody watching. At the same time, it makes sense when you think of it.
Right.
Don't put carpet in the bathroom, right? Like,
Why? Yeah.
don't put carpet in the kitchen. Why? Because that environment that you want to utilize in that environment would be counterproductive.
Right.
Don't put a TV in your bedroom, right?
True.
To me, having a TV in my bedroom is the same as having carpet in the kitchen. And people think that's a wild thought. And I'm like, well, this environment is for this.
Right.
If I want this entertainment, I go to the living room.
Mm-hmm.
In the living room environment, that's for entertainment. In this environment, in the garage environment, in the man cave environment, in the office environment, right? There's different things that can go on in that. So, do we have the access, but the wherewithal and the wisdom to curate these different environments intentionally?
Right.
Right. That's why when you brought up the great point of environment, I'm like, fantastic. Let's unpack it even more.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Let's unpack it into ones we have no control over.
Yep.
That'll be beneficial versus not be beneficial. Right. There are times where I'll tell you, man, I go to the airport, and the airport to me is starting to become an environment that is not healthy. Right.
Yeah.
Airport.
Right.
The airport. I'm like, where am I? Am I in a movie?
Yeah.
Like, what's going on? This guy's wearing a Snuggie.
Yeah.
This guy's wearing, open toe shoes, like the ones you get when a woman just got a pedicure.
Yep.
Like, what's going on?
Yeah.
Right. What's going on? So that environment has deteriorated to the point where it is just, but it wasn't like that growing up. Like, I didn't think much twice about the airport. It was just an experience. It was fun. You go to the airport. I hate to say it, but even my own city of New York City has become an environment that I get there and I'm like, this environment isn't good for me.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a fact.
Right.
So, what parts of those can we not change, but identify what works better for us?
Oh yeah.
Right. Eventually, my goal is to have a property near the water, near the ocean, because the sand and the air is different.
It's different.
The air is different.
It's different.
There's something about being near the ocean, and someone can probably break down the actual science behind the ions in the air and the salt, because it's something.
It's the largest life
because
form.
when like the waves crash and then the foam, but then it puts something into it, does something. I don't know what it does, but it does something. Yep. And there's something about connecting and grounding to sand. There's something there.
100%.
So if that's an environment I would like to put myself in, fantastic. If a person feels like they can get charged up in that environment for the better, for the better. I can go somewhere cold, but I don't really want to live in Minnesota, with all due respect. But I don't want to live somewhere where 8 of the 12 months out of the year are, cold, and then 4 of those 8 months are Arctic. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm not about that life.
Yeah, right.
No problem. But if you are, God bless.
For sure.
No problem. But that goes back to what you said earlier, which is identifying what kind of tree you are.
Right.
Then identifying this environment conversation, environments that we have no control over, and then being strategic and discerning of where we put ourselves. And there are going to be a lot of environments we have no control over.
Oh yeah.
Well, yeah, I just thought of a funny one, which is environment none of us have any control over, but we have to go to is the DMV.
Oh,
right. It's something kind of funny, right?
Whoa.
It's like we have no control over that environment, but we have to go.
Mm-hmm.
And no one likes going. Why? Because of the treatment, the energy, all that kind of rolled into one. So then the second side of the environment conversation is going to be what we can curate, and are we being intentional? Are we being intentional and protecting those environments?
Oh yeah. And
if we allow those environments to slowly seep into one another, it could be challenging, right? It's, if a person does have the opportunity to have enough space that they can curate different environments, then have at it. And again, to me, a television in the bedroom is the same as carpet in the kitchen.
Mm-hmm.
Because to me, it's a counterproductive, which is nothing wrong with the tool. Carpet's great in the bedroom. There's nothing wrong with carpeting, but in that environment, it actually ends up being counterproductive, because the amount of cleaning that you'd have to do in a kitchen to keep a carpet would be counterproductive to the use of that space. And I think it takes away from the use of that space the same way a television in the bedroom takes away from the space of what that's intended for. So curate our environments, hold ourselves to the standard that the environments are there, and get the most out of those environments.
Oh yeah, man, you said a whole lot right there. Whole lot. I agree with everything. That was great points. It sparked in my mind, especially when you were talking about like environments. It made me think about professionalism. You touched on like the corporate world. You touched on entrepreneurship, and I want to go down the road of being a pro and professionalism and the environment that it takes to be a pro.
Mhm.
And you think about the corporate sector. I spent 10 years in the corporate world, right? And I enjoyed it. I just understood what type of tree I was, right? I truly enjoyed going through the growth challenges, going through the learning processes, and going through the journey of being a personal trainer, learning how to be a professional entrepreneur. I enjoy that process.